It was supposed to be the perfect escape. A luxury cruise through the Caribbean, 7 days of sun, sea breeze, and no responsibilities. A chance to unwind, laugh with old friends, sip champagne on the deck, and pretend that the world was exactly as it should be. The port of Miami sparkled under the Wednesday morning sun, and towering above it all was the Celestial Pearl, a 12-deck marvel that glistened like a floating palace. Over 2,000 passengers eagerly boarded, their eyes wide with anticipation, their hearts set on paradise. Among them was a man who turned heads wherever he walked, Marcus Delroy. At 43, he looked like a man who had conquered the world. Impeccable khaki suit, gold watch flashing in the sunlight, and that unmistakable air of a man used to getting what he wanted. The fast food empire he built, Delroy's Kitchen, paid for this lifestyle. First-class travel, designer clothes, and a wife who, at least on paper, was perfect. Isabella Cruz walked beside him, elegant as ever in a soft peach dress that hugged her figure just right. At 38, she still carried that quiet beauty that once made heads turn at every room she entered. But lately, there was something in her eyes, a heaviness, a distance, the kind of sadness that doesn't scream, it whispers constantly. "Did you pack the sunscreen?" Marcus asked, casually checking their bags. "Of course," she smiled without looking at him. "Sunscreen, after sun, and everything else we need to survive a week in the tropics." They were joined by their longtime friends, Marcia and Reggie Levin. 10 years of vacations, double dates, business parties. Marcia, a sharp-witted banking executive, and Reggie, a defense attorney who'd gone to college with Marcus. From the outside, these were two golden couples living a golden life. Barbados, Martinique, Dominica. Marcia exclaimed as she hugged Isabella. "We're living the dream, girl." 7 days in heaven, Reggie added, patting Marcus on the back. But behind the laughs and toasts, there were fractures already forming. By late afternoon, the boarding was complete. Documents checked, bags scanned, cabin keys distributed. The O'Neills settled into their luxurious suite on the 7th deck, floor-to-ceiling port windows, plush bedding, and all the amenities money could buy. "Not bad," Marcus grunted, tossing his suitcase onto the bed. "For this price, it damn well better be good." Isabella said nothing. She walked to the window, staring out at the pier, the gangway, the slowly swaying ship beneath her feet. "Do you remember our honeymoon?" she asked quietly, almost to herself. "We were on a cruise then, too. Bahamas. A smaller ship. We danced on the deck that first night." Marcus didn't look up from his unpacking. That ship was a bathtub compared to this one. At 5 p.m., the horn sounded. The Celestial Pearl eased away from port, its engines humming, the city skyline shrinking behind them like a memory they didn't want to revisit. On the 10th deck, champagne glasses clinked. "To new memories," Reggie said. "To second chances," Marcia added. "To an unforgettable week," Marcus toasted. Isabella raised her glass. Her lips smiled. Her eyes did not. That night, they dined at the ship's main restaurant, an opulent dining hall adorned with chandeliers, panoramic windows, and the soft rhythm of live jazz drifting through the air. Everything was perfect on the surface, but perfection has a cost, and sometimes it's hiding something ugly underneath. The waitress assigned to their table was young, no more than 25, slender, graceful, hair pulled into a neat ponytail. Her name tag read Talia, and the moment she appeared, Marcus's attention shifted. It was subtle at first, a glance too long, a compliment too smooth, a smile that lingered. "Talia," he repeated slowly. "That's a beautiful name. Has anyone told you that before?" Isabella's fingers tightened around her napkin. She had seen this look before. She had heard that tone. It was the same voice Marcus used when he was charming a client or seducing a stranger. Reggie caught the tension, tried to steer the conversation toward excursions. Marcia, seated across from Isabella, offered a nervous smile. But it was too late. The spell had been cast. Marcus was performing, and Talia, visibly uncomfortable, tried to do her job. "Jamaica," Marcus said, leaning in. "Now that's a paradise. You must break hearts every day." "Marcus," Isabella cut in, her voice sharp. Let the girl work. What? He replied, feigning innocence. I'm just being friendly. Dinner dragged on like a nightmare with violins. Every time Talia approached, Marcus found an excuse to flirt, to touch her hand, to compliment her skin. And Isabella, she was shrinking inside, minute by minute, bite by bite. Public humiliation served on fine china. Finally, she'd had enough. You're flirting with a girl half your age right in front of me, she snapped, rising from the table. Guests turned to stare. Talia froze. Marcia reached out, but Isabella pulled away. Let everyone hear it. Let them all know what kind of man you really are. Marcus's jaw tensed. Lily, sit down. You're making a scene. A scene. Her voice cracked. 20 years of marriage, and this is the respect I get. Without waiting for a reply, she stormed out. Out of the hall. Out of the noise. Out of the charade. She needed air. She needed distance. What she didn't know was that someone had been watching her from the upper deck. Someone who wasn't looking for a scene, but who saw her pain and cared. His name was Travis Milton, the ship's captain, and he was about to change everything. The sun had long dipped below the horizon, leaving behind streaks of orange and purple smeared across the sky. The ocean was calm, its vastness stretching endlessly in every direction. On the upper deck of the Celestial Pearl, a woman stood alone, shoulders tense, hands gripping the railing as if it were the only thing anchoring her to the earth. Isabella Cruz was trying to hold herself together. Her heart pounded in her chest, her eyes stung with tears she refused to let fall. Not here, not where anyone could see, not again. That night's dinner had been unbearable, humiliating. 20 years of being his wife. And Marcus still couldn't help himself, couldn't resist the pull of attention, couldn't stop reaching for something new, something younger. Excuse me, ma'am. The voice startled her, calm, smooth, with a gentle British accent. She turned and found herself looking into the eyes of a man in a crisp white captain's uniform. Tall, broad-shouldered, hair dusted with gray at the temples. And yet, what caught her most wasn't the uniform or the posture. It was the way he looked at her, like she wasn't invisible, like he saw her. I'm sorry, she said, quickly wiping her cheeks. Everything's fine. I'm Captain Travis Milton, he replied softly, tipping his cap. But judging by the tears, I'd say everything is not quite fine. Isabella laughed, but there was no joy in it. Just fatigue. It's nothing. Just marital turbulence. Comes with a package, right? Travis stepped beside her, his hands resting gently on the railing. In my 20 years on the ocean, I've seen many couples bored with high hopes. Some leave stronger. Others, the sea reveals the cracks they tried to ignore on land. Isabella looked down at the dark waters below. You comfort all your passengers like this? Only the ones who seem like they've forgotten how to smile. She turned toward him slowly. There was no charm in his tone, no smirk, no calculated flattery. Just concern, genuine and quiet. Isabella, she said after a pause. Isabella Cruz. He nodded. Nice to meet you, Mrs. Cruz. They stood in silence for a moment, just listening to the waves lap against the hull. You know, Travis said, no matter how heavy a heart feels, the ocean has a way of softening it. These waves, they've seen every kind of pain. And still, they keep moving. Isabella looked out again, really looked this time. The sky above, the rhythm of the sea, the hush of wind in her hair. And for a moment, the ache inside her loosened. Thank you, she said quietly. He smiled, but didn't press her further. He didn't need to. He had already said enough. That night, she returned to her cabin without a word to Marcus. She slipped into bed, her back to him. The silence between them was thick, cold. He didn't reach for her. She didn't expect him to. The next morning, there was a knock at the door. Marcia's voice called from the hallway, concerned. Lily? You okay in there? Marcus opened the door. Marcia and Reggie stepped inside, their faces tight with worry. We didn't see you after dinner, Marcia said, going straight to Isabella, who sat at the edge of the bed in her silk pajamas. I'm fine, Isabella replied, her voice clipped, her eyes avoiding her husband. Reggie turned to Marcus. Man, you went too far last night. Marcus sighed, rubbing his face. I know. I didn't mean to. I just... Marcus, Marcia interrupted. She's your wife. She's not just part of the scenery. Isabella stood and walked to the porthole. The coast of Barbados was coming into view. Lush green, white sand beaches, tiny pastel houses. A paradise. A paradise she barely felt present in. Marcus approached, voice softer now. Lily, I'm sorry. I don't know what came over me. Maybe I drank too much. You had one glass, she snapped, still not looking at him. He placed his hands on her shoulders, gently. I promise. It won't happen again. Marcia stepped forward. Lily couples fight, but forgiveness matters. He knows he was wrong. Of course I do, Marcus echoed quickly. I'll change. You're the only one I want. Isabella turned to face him. His eyes were pleading, his smile hopeful, and yet all she saw was another performance. One she had seen before. The script never changed. All right, she said finally. I forgive you. But if it happens again, it won't, Marcus said, interrupting. It won't. I swear. They embraced, but her body remained still in his arms. After breakfast, the group went sightseeing. Markets, old churches, sugarcane fields. Marcus was on his best behavior, cracking jokes, buying her souvenirs, playing the doting husband. But Isabella could see the cracks in his performance, just like he never noticed the ones in hers. That evening, when they returned to the ship, Isabella slipped away. She told the group she was tired, that she'd rest in their cabin before dinner. But instead, she wandered. Deck 6. Shops. Cafes. The sound of strangers. She sat alone at a cafe table, cradling a cup of tea. At the next table, an elderly couple smiled as the husband read aloud from a travel guide, his hand resting gently on his wife's. That kind of tenderness. Had she ever had that with Marcus? Had they ever truly seen one another? She couldn't remember. They met in college. He was ambition in human form. She was drawn to his power, his drive, his promises. And somewhere between wedding vows and business empires, she had disappeared. By the time she reached the upper deck again, the sun was dipping low. Mrs. Cruz, came a voice, warm, familiar. Travis. He was leaning against the railing, still in uniform. But this time, there was a quiet casualness in his stance. Good evening, he said. Good evening, she replied, unable to hide her smile. How was Barbados? Beautiful, she said automatically. Then, more honestly, lonely. He nodded. Would you like a private tour of the ship tomorrow? There's a lot of beauty passengers never get to see. Her heart fluttered just a little. Maybe, she replied. For the first time in a long time, she felt something stir. Something real. Something dangerous. And the storm was only beginning to form. The next afternoon, while Marcus lounged by the pool, sipping a mojito and laughing with Reggie, Isabella Cruz stood at the elevators on Deck 7, heart pounding, mind racing. She told her husband she needed rest. But in truth, she had never been more awake. When the elevator doors opened, Captain Travis Milton was already there. No formal uniform this time, just navy slacks, a crisp white shirt, and that calm, disarming smile. Ready for your tour? He asked. More than ready, she replied, her voice low, barely hiding the excitement beneath. They walked together through hidden corridors few passengers ever saw. Metal walkways, narrow staircases, behind-the-scenes passages. And yet, none of it felt cold. Not with him beside her. His voice was calm, measured, guiding. And she followed not just out of curiosity, but out of something deeper. Something unnamed. They entered the ship's control bridge, the beating heart of the Celestial Pearl. From here, every movement of the ship was monitored. Screens showed radar, engine data, ventilation, weather patterns. Everything felt precise, controlled. Travis walked her through it all, pointing to panels, systems, communication lines. This is where it all happens, he explained. Where we keep over 2,000 souls safe at sea. Isabella stood silently, eyes wide. Impressive, she whispered. But it wasn't the technology that impressed her. It was him, his poise, his purpose, the way he treated this ship and her with respect. She stepped closer to a large monitor displaying a real-time model of the ship. He joined her, standing just behind, so close she could feel the warmth of his breath near her shoulder. She didn't move. She didn't want to. "There's something beautiful about the sea," he murmured. "It's dangerous, but honest." His voice was different now, lower, quieter. And suddenly, the air between them shifted. The tour wasn't about ship systems anymore. It was about two people who were no longer pretending. "Would you like to see the engine room?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She nodded. They descended into the ship's lower levels, into the mechanical belly of the beast. The hum of turbines echoed around them. Pipes ran along the ceiling. Everything was heat, steel, and raw motion. "This," Travis said, "is the power that carries us across oceans." Isabella stood still, overwhelmed, not by the engines, but by the realization that her life had drifted so far from anything that felt alive. When Travis leaned closer to point out a pressure valve, his arm brushed hers. She didn't flinch. He looked at her. She met his eyes. Something inside her snapped. Or maybe, finally, something inside her broke free. "You don't have to say anything," he said gently. "But if you want to leave, I'll walk away right now." Isabella stared at him. His expression wasn't lust. It wasn't conquest. It was invitation. Quiet. Vulnerable. Real. "I don't want you to walk away," she whispered. He led her to a small, technical room, quiet, dim, with only a soft hum from a nearby vent. Through a tiny porthole, the ocean glistened in streaks of blue and gold. "No cameras. No crew. Just them. Just truth. This is where I come when I need silence," Travis said. "To think. To breathe." They stood there for a beat too long. Then Isabella turned to him. "Thank you," she said, "for seeing me, for not asking me to pretend." He reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. And just like that, the kiss happened. Soft, hesitant, then deeper. Her hands moved to his chest. His arms wrapped around her waist. It wasn't reckless. It was inevitable. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. "We shouldn't," Travis murmured. "I know," Isabella replied. But neither of them moved. Moments later, he led her, silently, to his private quarters on Deck 8. His cabin was modest, clean, lined with nautical maps, old books, and a single photograph of a lighthouse on the coast of Maine. But she didn't notice any of it. All she could feel was his touch. And for the first time in over a decade, she felt wanted, not as a possession, not as a businessman's wife, but as a woman, a soul. What happened between them wasn't rushed. It was slow, unfolding like a secret kept too long. Hours later, as they lay in silence, she stared at the ceiling, tears silently welling in her eyes. "What now?" she whispered. "I don't know," Travis said, his hand brushing gently through her hair. "But I don't regret it. Neither do I." Narrator's voice softens. For Isabella, everything had changed in that room. The ship still sailed. The dinners still happened. The excursions continued. But her world had cracked open, and in the quiet corners of the celestial pearl, hidden from view, a forbidden love began to take root. What she didn't know was that every step she took from her husband was one step closer to the edge of something unthinkable. Isabella Cruz had always been good at playing roles. The devoted wife, the gracious hostess, the smiling passenger. She knew when to laugh, when to nod, when to play the part her husband expected. But now something had shifted. For the first time in years, she wasn't just performing, she was hiding, and the thrill of it terrified her. By day, she walked the decks arm in arm with Marcus, smiling for photos, chatting politely with Marcia and Reggie, clinking glasses at sunset dinners. By night, she disappeared, quietly, deliberately, into corners of a ship where no one was watching, into rooms that smelled of salt and steel and freedom, into Travis. Their stolen hours were a blur of whispers and embraces. They talked of their pasts, their regrets, their longings. And between every conversation, every touch, Isabella felt more like herself than she had in 2 decades. But double lives come with double edges. "Lily," Marcia said one afternoon, placing a hand gently on Isabella's arm, "you've seemed distant lately. Is everything okay?" "I'm just tired," Isabella replied quickly. "It's been a full schedule." Marcia didn't push, but her eyes lingered, curious, maybe even concerned. Meanwhile, Marcus was beginning to notice changes too. His wife, who once asked about his day, now stared out the window. The woman who once laughed at his stories now responded with silence. And worst of all, she didn't seem hurt. She seemed free. That scared him more than anything. One night, after another lavish dinner, Marcus reached for her hand across the table. "Lily, are we having a good vacation?" She blinked, as if pulled from somewhere far away. "Of course," she said with a faint smile. "Everything's fine." But everything wasn't fine. Not for her, and certainly not for him. He began watching her more closely. When she left the cabin, when she returned, how long she was gone. He made small talk with crew members, asked questions that sounded casual but weren't. Isabella could feel it, the pressure closing in. The space she'd carved out for herself on this ship was beginning to shrink. She started taking longer routes to meet Travis, changing her patterns, avoiding decks she'd used before. She was careful, deliberate, but no one can hide forever. That afternoon, after returning from their shore excursion on Martinique, she told the group she needed to rest. Marcus offered to join her. "No," she said quickly. "You go lie by the pool. I just want quiet." He kissed her cheek. "Dinner's at 8. Don't be late." She nodded, but instead of heading to their suite, she slipped into a maintenance stairwell and took the crew access corridor to Deck 8. Travis was waiting. No words were needed. They held each other in silence, the distant hum of the engines filling the air like a heartbeat. "Do you ever regret this?" she asked softly. "Only that we didn't meet sooner," he said. She looked away. "I've never done anything like this in my life." "I believe you," Travis said gently. "But I've watched you. You're not selfish. You're not cruel. You're just tired of being invisible." Her eyes welled with tears. "I don't know how to go back," she whispered. He took her hands. "Maybe you don't have to." But that was the lie they both pretended to believe. Because somewhere deep inside, Isabella knew the truth. This was never going to last. She had tasted something real, something raw, and now she was caught between two lives. One she no longer wanted, and one she could never truly have. Back on the upper deck, Marcus was pacing. She was late. Again. And this time, he wasn't going to pretend it didn't bother him. He started asking around. Had anyone seen his wife? Had she been to the spa? The cafe? The library? No one had answers. And that silence burned like gasoline in his chest. Narrator's voice darkens. Marcus Delroy wasn't a man who liked being out of control. He controlled his business, his image, his future. But now his wife, the one constant in his carefully constructed life, was slipping from his grip. And he was not the kind of man who let things go quietly. Narrator's voice slows, suspense builds. The next morning, Isabella stood before the mirror, brushing her hair. Marcus leaned against the doorway, watching her. "You've been different lately." "Different how?" she asked, her voice careful. "Quiet. Distant. It's like you're somewhere else." She set the brush down slowly. "Maybe I am." He frowned. "You want to tell me what's going on?" She met his gaze in the mirror. Calm, unflinching. "Do you really want the truth?" she asked. Before he could answer, she walked past him, out the door onto the deck. She couldn't speak it yet, not out loud, but inside a decision was forming. This cruise, this floating illusion, had become something else entirely. It was no longer a getaway. It was a reckoning, and soon someone was going to drown. By the 5th morning of the cruise, the Celestial Pearl floated somewhere between Dominica and disaster. The waters were calm, the sky clear, the breakfast buffet as extravagant as ever. But beneath the surface, a man was unraveling. Marcus Delroy awoke to find his wife already gone. Again, the sheets beside him were cold. No note, no explanation, no sign of her. Just like yesterday, just like the day before that. Something wasn't right. He could feel it now, not just in her distance, but in her silence, and that new glint in her eyes when she looked away from him. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was something else. He pulled on his clothes, skipped breakfast, and began searching. Deck by deck, room by room. He found her sitting in a quiet cafe on Deck 6, alone with a cup of coffee, staring out the window like she was somewhere far beyond the horizon. "Good morning," he said, sliding into the seat across from her. "You're up early." I couldn't sleep, she replied, her tone flat. Lily, he said carefully, I feel like we're not spending time together on this trip. She didn't look at him. We all need different things, she said. You like the pool. I like the quiet. He studied her face. Calm, almost peaceful, but there was something behind the calmness, something locked behind her eyes. What quiet, he asked. Where are you finding it? She finally turned to him, her voice cool, controlled. Everywhere you're not. It hit like a slap. He swallowed hard. Rachel asked me yesterday if something was wrong with you. Tell Rachel I'm not her child. Isabella snapped. She doesn't need to check on me. Marcus leaned back, shocked by the edge in her voice. Isabella was many things, poised, composed, even sharp at times. But this was new. Lily, what's going on with you? You want the truth? She asked, her tone soft now, too soft. Yes, he whispered. She didn't answer. She just stood up and left him sitting there. Narrator voice deepens. Later that day, Marcus tried again. They met with Marcia and Reggie for lunch, but Isabella barely spoke. She smiled politely, nodded when appropriate, but her body was somewhere else. At one point, Reggie leaned over to Marcus and whispered, You okay, man? She's changed. Marcus forced a smile. She's just tired. But inside, his nerves were fraying. That evening, as the group made plans for the ship's theater show, Isabella declined. I've got a headache, she said. I'll lie down. Again, Marcus didn't argue. He just nodded. But when the show began, he didn't go either. He waited 15 minutes. Then, quietly, he returned to their cabin. Empty. The bed was untouched. The bathroom spotless. The lights still off. She wasn't resting. She was lying. And Marcus Delroy had spent his life sniffing out lies. From business partners. From employees. From anyone who tried to take what belonged to him. He stormed down the hallway and began searching. Not like before, this time he was thorough, systematic, angry. He checked the cafes, the spa, the promenade decks. Nothing. He checked the crew areas, the restricted corridors he wasn't supposed to enter. And that's when he heard it. Laughter. A woman's laugh. Her laugh. It was coming from behind a partially open metal door marked Authorized Personnel Only. Marcus stepped quietly closer, pressing himself to the wall. He peered inside, and what he saw broke him. Isabella was in the arms of another man, and not just any man. The captain, Trevis Muton. Their bodies were close, hands tangled in each other's shirts, mouths locked in a kiss that wasn't tentative or new. It was full of history, of want, of something that had been building for days. He staggered back, breath stolen from his lungs. 20 years. 20 damn years he had given her. He built her a life, bought her everything, carried her, protected her. And this is how she repaid him? With some second-rate sailor? With a man who lived on boats while Marcus built an empire? His fists clenched, his jaw tightened. He didn't barge in. He didn't scream. He didn't drag her out. He did something worse. He watched. He watched long enough to erase any doubts, to burn the betrayal into his memory like a scar. Then, silent as a shadow, he turned and left. Narrator voice slows, sinister. Back in his cabin, Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing. The rage was cold now, focused. He didn't cry. He didn't pace. He planned. He thought of lawyers, of property, of headlines, of his reputation. What would people say? Marcus Delroy, cheated on by his wife with a damn cruise captain? No, he wouldn't let that happen. He rehearsed it in his head. The conversation, the confrontation, the divorce. But no matter how he played it out, it always ended the same way, with him losing everything. And Marcus Delroy had never been a man who accepted loss. Narrator voice drops, heavy with ominous calm. An hour later, Isabella returned. Her face was flushed, her eyes distant. She looked happy. Hey, she said casually. How was the show? I didn't go, he said flatly. I was looking for you. Her smile faltered. Me? Why? I wanted to talk. But you weren't in the cabin. Where were you, Lily? She paused. I was walking the deck. Then I stopped in the cafe. Right, Marcus said. The cafe. He smiled, a small, cold smile that didn't reach his eyes. Let's go for a walk, he said softly. She hesitated. Maybe we should just stay in. No, he said firmly. Fresh air will do us good. Come on. He He reached for her hand. This time, she didn't pull away, but something in her gut told her she should have. The upper deck of the Celestial Pearl was nearly deserted. The ocean stretched out into darkness, moonlight dancing on the waves like ghosts at play. The night was quiet, the kind of silence that usually calms the soul. But tonight, it was the silence before storm. Marcus Delroy walked beside Isabella Cruz, his grip on her hand firm. Too firm. She said nothing, but she felt it in her bones, the weight in the air, the tension under his skin. Something was wrong. They reached the stern of the ship, where the lights faded and only the ocean remained. No music, no laughter, no cameras, just them, alone. Marcus let go of her hand. Isabella walked to the railing, trying to steady her nerves. "It's beautiful out here," she said softly. "So clear, so quiet." "Yes," Marcus replied, stepping behind her. "Beautiful." There was a pause. Then his voice, calm but colder than the sea. "Lily, I want to talk to you, and I want you to be honest with me." She froze. "What is it?" she asked carefully. He didn't answer right away, just stared at her. "I know about the captain," he said finally. Her breath caught. A wave crashed softly below. She turned toward him, heart pounding. What do you mean?" "I know," he repeated. "I saw you. Today. In the engine room. With him." Silence. She said nothing. Could say nothing. There was no use lying. He had seen. "How long?" he asked. His voice was still low, but it had changed. Beneath it was a tremble. A fury kept barely in check. Isabella swallowed hard. "Since the second day," she whispered. "After the tour." He blinked. "So, while I was apologizing, while I was trying to fix us, you were—" He stopped himself, shook his head. "You were already gone." "Marcus, it's not that simple." He laughed. A bitter, sharp sound. "Not that simple. You cheated on me, Lily, with the first man who smiled at you on a boat." "He's not the first," she snapped. And with those words, something inside him cracked. "What's happening between us?" he demanded. "What is this? A fling? A fantasy?" She looked him in the eye, and her voice was steady. "Maybe it's love." Marcus stepped back, staggered. He looked at her like she was a stranger. "No," he whispered. "No, you don't get to do this. You don't get to throw 20 years away for some damn sailor." Isabella's voice rose. For the first time, it was her turn to yell. "I'm not throwing anything away. You did that. Every time you flirted. Every time you treated me like background. Every time you made me feel invisible. You had everything." Marcus roared. "Everything you ever wanted." "No," she shouted back. "I had what you wanted. Your life. Your money. Your damn empire. But me? I had nothing." He shook his head violently. "You're lying. You're confused." "I'm suffocating, Marcus," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "I'm dying inside this marriage every single day." And that was the final blow. He lunged, grabbed her by the shoulders. "You're not leaving me," he growled through clenched teeth. "Do you hear me? You're not going anywhere." "Let me go," she screamed, trying to pull free. "You're hurting me." But he wasn't listening anymore. The rage had consumed him. Everything he had built, all the control, the image, the power, was shattering before his eyes. And then he saw it. A heavy metal fitting, part of the ship's emergency gear, bolted to the railing nearby. Without thinking, without understanding what he was doing, he grabbed it. "No." Isabella saw the swing coming, but too late. The blow landed on her temple. She collapsed. Hard. Blood spilled instantly, pooling on the white deck beneath her. For a second, everything went still. Marcus stood over her, breathing hard, the metal object still in his hand. He stared. He waited. She didn't move. He dropped to his knees, shaking. "Lily, get up. Please." No response. He pressed his fingers to her wrist. No pulse. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no, no." But the truth was already clear. She was gone. Narrator voice slows, grows cold. He looked around. No weaknesses. No footsteps. Just the sound of the waves and the beating of his own heart. He saw the blood. Too much blood. He saw the lifeboat rigging, the railing, the open ocean. And then the idea came. An accident. She slipped. She fell. Hit her head. Washed away into the dark. These things happen. Not often, but they happen. And if anyone could sell that story, it was Marcus Delroy. He lifted her body, heavier than he imagined, carried her to the railing. "I didn't mean to," he whispered. "You pushed me. You made me do this." And then he let her go. Her body disappeared into the waves without a sound. He stood there for a long time. Then, mechanically, he returned, found a mop left behind by crew, scrubbed the deck, threw the metal weapon overboard, changed his clothes, told himself it was over, told himself he had no choice. But deep inside, something darker had taken hold. Because Marcus Delroy hadn't just lost his wife. He had murdered the only person who ever dared to stop being his reflection. The deck was spotless. Not a drop of blood remained. Not a smear. Not a trace. Marcus Delroy stood over it all, the mop in his hands, his breath shallow, precise. The metal fitting, the murder weapon, was already gone, swallowed by the dark ocean. Isabella's body gone too. Everything was gone, except the truth. He returned to the cabin like a man who had just come from a spa. Calm, steady. He took a long, scalding shower, scrubbed the sweat from his body, changed into fresh clothes, sat down at the desk, poured himself a glass of whiskey, and stared at nothing. In his mind, he was already rehearsing. Tomorrow morning, he'd raise the alarm. He would act panicked. He'd cry. He'd say he couldn't find his wife, that she must have gone out on deck during the night and never came back. He would let others do the talking, the wondering. He would look heartbroken. He had done it before. On stage. In boardrooms. This would be no different. The police wouldn't be called until the ship docked. That gave him time. Enough time to clean up the mess. Literally and emotionally. But guilt doesn't clean up easily. Narrator voice slows. He tried to sleep that night. He couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face. Not the angry face from their final fight. Not the cold, distant expression she wore over dinner. No, he saw the young version of her. The one from college. The one who believed in him. Who stood by his side as he built everything. The woman who once kissed him like he was the only man in the world. Now she was gone, and all he had left was silence. The next morning, he put on his best performance yet. He went to Marcia and Reggie's cabin first, knocking with false urgency. "Have you seen Lily?" he asked, voice tense. "She wasn't in bed when I woke up." "What do you mean?" Marcia asked, frowning. "I thought maybe she couldn't sleep. Maybe she went for a walk. But I've searched everywhere. The cafe, the deck, the spa. I can't find her." Concern turned to alarm quickly. Within the hour, crew members were notified. The captain was informed. Though Marcus avoided Travis Milton directly, knowing full well the man had already lost what mattered most. By noon, the ship was in a quiet frenzy. Announcements were made. Crew searched every cabin, every corridor. No sign of Isabella Cruz. Narrator voice darkens, intensifies. Travis heard the news from his first officer. A woman's gone missing. Her name's Isabella Cruz. He froze. No, it couldn't be. He dropped everything and ran. To the decks. The cabin. The last cafe they visited. She was nowhere. He tried to stay calm, but inside he was cracking. They had plans. She was going to meet him later. They were supposed to talk about what would happen after the cruise. About leaving. About starting over. But now, gone? Just gone? He knew in his gut this wasn't an accident. And there was only one person on this ship who had reason to want her gone. Narrator voice builds suspense. Marcus played the grieving husband well. He sat with his friends, face in hands, tears in his eyes. "I don't know what happened," he said, voice trembling. "She wasn't sleeping well. Maybe she went out for air. Maybe she slipped." "Don't say that," Reggie said. "We'll find her." But even he didn't sound convinced. Marcia sat quietly, watching Marcus closely. She remembered how Isabella had acted these past few days. The distance, the quiet tension, the way she never quite met her husband's eyes. And now, this? Something didn't feel right. By late afternoon, the mood on the ship had shifted. Passengers whispered. Crew members exchanged glances. An entire person had vanished. No trace, no witnesses. The ocean was a cruel place to disappear. But some were already questioning the story. Why wasn't she wearing shoes if she went for a walk? She was so careful, always clutched the railing. I saw them arguing on the deck a few nights ago. The rumors began like sparks. And Marcus knew how fast sparks could turn into fire. Narrator voice slows, uneasy calm. That evening, Marcus sat alone in his cabin. The sun had set. The ship rocked gently. He stared at his reflection in the mirror. Who was this man? The protector? The provider? Or something else now? A killer? No. He shook his head. He didn't mean to kill her. She had provoked him. She had cheated. Leet. Disgraced him. She had destroyed their life. It wasn't murder. It was a moment of rage. It was her fault. Wasn't it? Wasn't it? He said it again. Out loud this time. It wasn't my fault. But the mirror didn't believe him. Narrator voice soft, haunting. He looked at the empty bed behind him. For the first time since he met her, it wasn't hers anymore. It was just a bed. And he was just a man. Alone. With nothing left but the story he would have to keep telling. And the ocean. That would never stop whispering her name. The morning sun rose over the celestial pearl, casting golden light across the open sea, but nothing felt bright anymore. The cruise was still technically in motion. The meals were still served. The shows went on, but a shadow had fallen across every deck, every hallway, every passenger smile. Isabella Cruz was missing, and no one had answers. Captain Travis Milton had tried to keep his composure. He stood in front of the crew, commanding search teams, combing every inch of the ship with military precision. But inside, he was already unraveling. He knew she didn't fall. She didn't vanish. She was taken. And someone on board, someone close, knew exactly what happened. Narrator voice tense. Marcia and Reggie watched Marcus closely. At first, they offered sympathy. Reggie even hugged him. Marcia brought him tea, but it didn't sit right. None of it. I don't buy it. Marcia whispered to her husband late one night. What? Marcus. His story. The way he's acting. He's grieving. No. He's controlling the story. You've seen it. When he talks to the crew, to the captain. It's all too precise. Reggie frowned. You think he did something? I think Isabella was trying to get away, she said softly. And now she's gone. The next morning, port authorities were called ahead of docking in San Juan. The ship was still in open water, but they were approaching land, and Travis wasn't going to let this slide under the rug. He called Marcus to his private office. We've initiated a full investigation, he said. Marcus stayed calm. Of course. That's what we all want. Answers. Isabella's personal belongings haven't moved. Her wallet is untouched. Her sandals were still in your cabin. No signs of packing. No signs of planning. You're sure she didn't mention feeling ill? Depressed? No, Marcus said flatly. She was fine. Travis leaned forward. Was she happy? There was a pause. We had our ups and downs. Like any couple. Travis stared at him. The silence pressed in. I'd like you to submit to a formal statement when we reach port, Travis said. Standard procedure. Marcus nodded, jaw clenched. But inside? Panic. Narrator voice, slow, ominous. He went back to his cabin and began cleaning. Not for evidence. That was already done. No, he was cleaning himself. Erasing the last signs of the man he used to be. The husband, the businessman, the illusion. Now he was something else. And the mask was starting to slip. The moment the ship docked, the real world came crashing in. Uniformed officers boarded. CSI technicians with gloves and flashlights moved in. Isabella's name echoed over intercoms. Flyers were printed. Crew were questioned. So were passengers. Travis gave his account. Marcia gave hers, including the argument. The fight. The silence that followed. But the one who spoke the most was Reggie. He came forward with what he'd seen 2 days prior. Marcus returning to the cabin alone. Looking shaken. Blood beneath one fingernail. A ripped button on his shirt collar. I thought it was nothing at the time, Reggie told investigators. But now everything mattered. Narrator voice sharp, inevitable. Marcus was called in for questioning by San Juan authorities. They started soft. When did you last see your wife? I went to sleep, Marcus said, expression blank. Woke up. She was gone. They showed him footage. Camera logs. Witness statements. Timelines. And then they showed him the porthole camera footage from a security feed he didn't know existed. Grainy. Black and white. But clear enough. Marcus dragging something across the deck. Blood on the floor. A shadow, her shadow, before it disappeared. He went pale. "Do you want to change your statement?" the officer asked. Marcus Delroy said nothing. The silence said everything. Narrator voice slows, somber. A few weeks later, a memorial was held for Isabella Cruz. Her body was never recovered, but her presence lingered in the hearts of those who had known her. In the silence of her absence, Marcia gave a eulogy. She was more than someone's wife, she said through tears. She was a friend, a woman who deserved to be seen, who deserved to be free. Reggie stood beside her, holding her hand. Captain Travis Milton was there too, standing at the back. Hutton Hunt, face hard, heart shattered. He had known her only briefly, but long enough to know what she had meant, and what had been taken from her. Narrator voice ends with weight. Marcus Delroy was charged with second-degree murder. He pleaded not guilty, claimed it was an accident, a moment of passion, that he didn't mean to do it. But no jury believed him. He was convicted, sentenced to life, and even in prison, he still insisted, "She drove me to it." But the truth? The truth was written in every quiet scream she never got to finish. In every day she smiled to hide the cracks. In every second she chose to live, before he decided she wasn't allowed to anymore. Closing narrator voice, quiet, reflective. Sometimes it's not the waves that kill you. It's the silence between them. And on that ship, in the dark, with no one watching, a woman who only ever wanted to feel alive again was taken by the one man who feared losing control more than losing her. Isabella Cruz never made a home, but her story did, and that will never be forgotten.